The Heat were in Washington tonight, and through the Wizards kept it close in the second quarter. Miami absolutely crushed them in the third, showing again what this team is capable of when their roster is fully healthy. The pace, the defense, the ridiculous shooting. We'll break it all down for you here on this live edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Tuesday live edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil. With me, as always, is my co-host Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Wes, this was the total package on display tonight. Everyone with Miami's big three fully healthy and getting key contributions from this incredibly deep roster. Just a 121-100 total beatdown of the Wizards, who are in a very, very bad emotional place right now. That doesn't stop them from talking a lot of stuff, though, especially to referees. A tightly officiated game. It seemed like emotions were getting out of control, particularly at the start of the second half. And yet Miami was still able to keep the composure, kept alive really by some incendiary shooting. 18 of 32 from three-point range. That's 56%. They finished 56% out in total from the field. They also shot 17 of 21 from the free throw line, 81%. Again, a 121-100 beatdown. Shut the Washington three-point shooting down, held them to just 7 of 31 from behind the arc, 22.6%. It was great. This was just exactly the kind of version of the Heat that so many people had been looking for, had gotten frustrated during those lean times there when maybe a player or two, especially when Jimmy was out or Kyle was out or Bam Adebayo. But let's start off, I think, with Kyle Lowry, because I think that's the big game. Again, just adding his stabilizing presence tonight. Not a great offensive game, perhaps, but just adding that leadership role that he has so effectively that we've been missing for so long, because now he's back in the lineup and he's really contributing to this team in an incredible way here.
You could just tell the difference that Kyle Lowry makes. Everything just falls into place. And you're right. Like, the box score doesn't really leap out with Kyle Lowry. It never does.
Doesn't tell its full story.
Season. Yeah. Well, Eric Spoelstra said the other night, I think it was after the Charlotte game, he doesn't even look at Kyle Lowry's box score because he has so much control of the game. And I think that's important. Look, there are going to be nights where Kyle Lowry does need to step up and score 20, but not now. Maybe in the playoffs. I don't know. But that's not what we're talking about here. What I think is so evident with Kyle Lowry and what he brings to the table is really how he gets Bam Adebayo going. It frees up Bam to just be aggressive. And look, I think the Heat coaches said something to Bam, or maybe it was Lowry or something, but the way that Bam Adebayo is attacking the basket, and I really want to highlight that word, attacking. Yes. He is getting there. He's got his eyes on the rim, and he's going for it. And it's helpful when Kyle Lowry is the guy running the offense. Now Bam doesn't have to be the hub in the low post or on the elbow or above the three-point line with the dribble handoffs or anything like that. Kyle Lowry, he knows, is going to be in charge of that, and so all he has to do is get to the rim. Most of the time, it's in pick and rolls, and his frequency rolling off of those screens has increased. I haven't looked it up, but just eye test, it's definitely gone up. But then even like the normal stuff, like the little dribble handoff kind of situations that he gets in, like the reads are coming quicker, right? Like he's going through that first read lightning fast. If it's not there, he's like, all right, I'm bigger, faster, stronger than almost anybody else on the court right now. I'm just going to go to the basket. And if I don't get to the basket, the only reason I'm not going to get there is because they're fouling me. And you look at his line tonight, he went to the line 8 times, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, finished with 21 points on 7 for 11 shooting. He's incredibly efficient. He's not settling for those mid-range little push floater things anymore, or not nearly as much. And I just think that of all the guys on the Heat, specifically the stars, Bam is benefiting from Kyle Lowry's presence more than any of them. And I don't know that anybody anticipated that going into the season, but it's pretty clear that that's the case.
I'm kind of hesitant. Like, I understand that Lowry is absolutely making a contribution in that sense. And maybe it is all about the role, right? With Lowry there as the main distributor, the guy controlling the pace, the tempo, overseeing the floor and where everybody's doing, it allows Bam to do things much more freely, right? Without having to think it through. Is you could just read and react. But there was this one play there, I think it was in the third quarter, where he recognized he was out on the elbow, recognized that he had Rui Hachimura on him, of course, a potential trade target, according to some reports. And you're looking, and Bam just whips the ball around, I think, more quickly than I've ever seen it. And he puts the ball down lightning fast, uses every
Yes.
ounce of his strength and speed and athleticism, and just bullies his way past Hachimura. And
Yeah.
I think he wound up getting the foul and getting to the line. By the way,
That's the one
out
that came to mind.
shooting,
I was just thinking about that one when I was just
yeah,
going through that little
out
spiel.
shooting Jimmy Butler from the free throw line too. 8 free throw attempts for Bam, just 6 free throw attempts from Jimmy. I don't think that's ever happened, at least not in the last 3 years that Jimmy has been in this roster. But again, that play, it had nothing to do with Kyle, had nothing to do with anybody else, but just Bam just saying, you know what, I've got this, I can do it. And the aggression in 24 minutes. He only played 24 minutes as a starter, just one more minute than PJ Tucker, 7 of 11 from the field too for 21 points. Absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Well, you're right. You don't want to give all the credit to Kyle Lowry, but I think you go back.
It's fair.
It was a few games ago where Bam said, just having Kyle on the floor makes all the difference in the world. I also
That's
think
true.
somebody said something to him because
Yeah.
kind of tepid nights against Toronto and Boston.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, "Where's aggressive Bam Adebayo?" We were wondering if his conditioning was in place where it needed to
Right.
be. Was that hand bothering? Was the shoulder starting to become an issue again? Like
Right.
people were having questions, and I don't know. Whatever questions there were, Bam was like, "The hell with your questions." And something switched. I don't know. It's purposeful, David. It's very purposeful. You could tell he's saying,
Yeah.
you could see the gears grinding. He's like, "No, I need to be more aggressive now," and then he
Yeah.
is, and then
Yeah.
it works, and it's
Yeah.
pretty remarkable what's happened there.
I made
Also,
that
you
point.
mentioned. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I made that point comparing him to Pascal Siakam in that first triple overtime game. Something about
Yeah.
Siakam, seeing that level of aggression, just again, reading, reacting, moving quickly with intent, something that Bam was missing. And I think we've seen it over the last few games. Go ahead, bring up your point again.
Well, no, I just want to say one thing about the Wizards, man. Like, look,
Ooh,
Charlotte was really bad in that game that Saturday night. The Wizards were worse, and like
yeah,
Charlotte has happy, good feelings this season. Sans that night, man, the Wizards are sad. Like that was my other takeaway. Like my two big takeaways from this game were, wow, Bam has really flipped something here, and
yeah,
oh boy, it must suck to be a Wizards fan right now because I don't know how you can watch that game, that team night in and night out. I know Bradley Beal wasn't playing for them, but it's
no
not like he
difference.
was making all that much of a difference in the first place. His defense when he was playing just went. It was gone. He was not playing any defense. He's not motivated. The rest of that team isn't motivated. Montrezl Harrell is out here saying that the vibes are terrible, and you could just tell. Like you didn't need reports. You didn't need a quote from Montrezl Harrell. You could just watch that game and be like, oh, they don't like
Yeah,
doing this right now. This is not a
no.
fun time for the Wizards right now.
No, and you've got reports that Spencer Dinwiddie is not the player they wanted him to be in free agency, that nobody
No.
likes him on this team. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
this is the exact opposite of where Miami is. And to think that not so long ago the Wizards were atop the Eastern Conference, playing great defense, holding the league, I think had the best mark in the league in terms of 3-point defense. Clearly not the case when they're giving up almost 60% shooting from Miami. Speaking of 3-point shooting, we should mention Duncan Robinson. Like early in the game, there were a couple plays there. And one, I think one might want to say the third possession there, Bam had the ball again at the elbow, and this time he sets a screen for Duncan. KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, does a pretty good job defending him, but Duncan manages to clear a little space. Bam sets the rescreen again. Duncan gets open, and like saying to myself, man, they're kind of focusing this offense a little bit too heavily on trying to get Duncan open. He better capitalize on this. And as soon as I say that to myself, he knocks down that shot, and you can just kind of see him get more into the rhythm. And it kind of just set the tone early on for Miami's offense, kept the defense at bay. He only went 4 of 10, 4 of 9 from 3-point range, but those are the kind of performances he can do. We'll talk a little bit more about Duncan in the last segment because, of course, his name has been linked to some trade rumors, and I think we can safely debunk that following tonight's performance. Not much of a teaser there, but you know what? Before we do that, we'll move on into our second segment, and we'll give credit where credit is due, but just wanted to remind all of you about one of our sponsors for today's show, TurboTax. We all have unique lives, whether you have invested in crypto for the first time this year, own an up-and-coming small business, or are raising rambunctious twins. I don't know if any of our listeners or viewers are raising rambunctious twins, but I can imagine. I've got a 3-year-old. It's very difficult. Luckily, TurboTax Live has experts who can answer your tax questions, walk you through the whole process, or do your taxes for you from start to finish, no matter your unique situation. To TurboTax Live experts, an interesting life means an even greater refund. So visit TurboTax.com to learn more. You do your thing. They've got your taxes. Intuit TurboTax Live.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. The NBA trade deadline is Thursday, February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and the Locked On NBA podcast will be covering it live from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Join Kim Becker, John Corrales, and Josh Lloyd to get analysis of every blockbuster move. Subscribe to Locked On NBA YouTube and turn your notifications on so you know when they go live. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Locked On Heat YouTube channel if you probably are if you're watching this live already, and tune into our show right after the NBA show. So we're going to go live 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, right after the NBA show. We're going to have live reaction to the trade deadline, specific how it relates to the Miami Heat. But let's whip up some credit cookies, David. So this is a new segment that we debuted recently, and the idea is simple. We have 10 cookies, credit cookies, and we get to divvy up those cookies however we see fit based on who deserves the most credit for this particular Heat win. But the first question is, what kind of cookies should they be, David?
Oh, you're putting me right in the spot here. I didn't know this was a thing that we had to pick the type of cookies. I'm plain, man. I'm kind of boring in that regard. Give me some chocolate chip cookies.
Nothing boring about that. Chocolate chip is the undefeated cookie. A good chocolate chip cookie, there's nothing better than that. I love a good chocolate chip cookie. All right, so we got 10 chocolate chip cookies.
I've got to ask a quick question here because I'm seeing in our comments something about a hot sauce kid during the halftime show. I did not, in all fairness, watch the halftime show. Do you know anything about this hot sauce kid? Please inform me. Keep me in the loop here. No, you don't know.
I was cleaning up the kitchen like an adult during halftime. So,
wow, that's new.
Wasn't watching that. You're right. That is new. That's what my fiance told me.
All
right. First credit cookie. I'm going to give it to Bam Adebayo. We spent much of the show so far talking about him, but the reason why I'm going to give him 5 of our 10 credit cookies. All right, so I'm giving him 50% of our credit cookies here. He was the reason why the Heat broke that game open in the second half. So the Wizards go on a 14-4 run to cut what was a double-digit lead for most of that game, a 20-point lead in that third quarter, cut that to 7 with 4 minutes left in the third. And then Bam basically just goes on his own personal 8-0 run. Extends the lead back 83-69, so back up to 14. Bam in the third quarter had 12 points, and the Heat did not look back after that. They go on a 21-1 run between the third and the fourth quarter. They're up 97-70 by 27 points within the first minute of the fourth quarter. The Wizards took a timeout within like 42 seconds of the fourth quarter, and at that point, it was just over, right? None of the starters came back in. Everybody got to rest. Jimmy Butler didn't play in the fourth quarter for the third straight game. Everybody was able to rest, including Bam, but I want to give like 50% of the credit to this game for this win to Bam, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, I can't take away from that. I think that seems maybe a little high because, we were just talking about the balance between Bam being aggressive and whether or not Kyle Lowry gets some of the credit for that. But he did have the most impactful game in terms of his encore production, 21 points for him. But 5 sounds about right. Doesn't leave much for the rest of the Heat roster, but I want to give at least a chocolate chip cookie of credit to Mr. Gabe Vincent in his 28 minutes of play. 6 of 9 from the floor, 4 of 6 from three-point range, finished with 16 points and a plus 14 in his minutes out there. Just a great performance from him. You had a good tweet about the fact that, he was brought onto the team as a scorer. That was the talk. Everybody heard about him. 3-point shooter. He's going to be this guy. He's going to be the guy who can stretch the floor. And for most of that season, remember, he was picked up right before the season went down the chute back in March of 2020, right before the pandemic first hit. And, he was part of that team. Nobody knew what to expect from him. Then, of course, he emerges back in the bubble. He doesn't have much of an impact there. Last year, we weren't quite sure what to expect out of him. This season, he starts off shaky. Not so long ago, people wanted to cut Gabe Vincent. Gabe Vincent's not an NBA player, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like I was one of the lone holdouts saying, you know what, I believe in him, his great effort, the shooting will come around. We kept hearing it. We kept saying, you know what, he was promised as a shooter, but he's doing everything else, even if that shooting hasn't come around yet. Me and Eric Reed, I think, were very supportive of Honest Gabe. I'm not sure how much I like that name there.
Not my favorite. Eric Reed's he's very hit or miss with the nicknames, but so am I. I takes one to know one.
Aside from all that, though, like his performance has just been so good
Yeah.
for the last half of the season. Like everything that he's done offensively and combining that incredible defense, that great effort, etc. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you can't take him out of the rotation now, even when Tyler Hero
Nope.
comes back. Maybe we'll talk about that later, but he's just been awesome for them. And like I said, like I tweeted, the one that you mentioned, it is a credit to Miami's developmental system, right? Where they noticed that this guy could be a defensive pest. They made him into one. They
Right.
noticed that he could be a facilitator because he's got that basketball IQ. They helped
Yes.
him turn him into one.
Right.
And he became that. And then once he got that stuff established, which is what helped him get onto the court for the Heat,
Right.
he was able, with extended minutes now, right? Because instead of playing 4, 5, 6 minutes here or there, he's playing 20 plus minutes a night. And now he's got time to go back into those scoring instincts that he has, because that's what he was in college. That's how he got to the NBA in the first place. And now he's a well-rounded player. Instead of just being a score first, smallish two guard, he's a
Yep.
well-rounded point guard who's a real difference maker for this team off the bench, and has earned a bona fide backup point guard role behind Kyle Lowry, and might be starting for this team if not for the fact that they have Kyle Lowry, who's still an all-pro point guard. So, yeah, he's been awesome. How many cookies did you give him? I wasn't paying attention to that.
Just one, maybe 1.5. I don't know if that's fair. I think
Let's
he
not start
deserves.
doing half cookies. That's crazy. All right, so we got 6 cookies. Can I give one cookie to the crowd?
No,
To like the Heat fans who showed up to that game?
those weren't Heat fans. Those were big. Those were really upset Wizards fans. Like I know that there's Eric Reed, to his credit, again saying, "Oh, this Heat team could be in college football because they travel so well, etc." Look. I've been in Orlando games. Those aren't Heat fans. Those are people that just hate the effing Magic because the Magic effing
We'll
sucks.
take
That's
them.
what that is.
We'll
Yeah,
take them. They can
sure,
come along.
sure. When they're shouting, "Let's go Heat!" I totally get it. Those
They were
Wizards
wearing
fans are
Heat
like,
jerseys. They didn't just buy the Heat jersey because their Wizards team sucks
they bought them at
halftime.
halftime. They bought them at halftime. They're like, "Oh, this team's down 7.
I'm giving
Forget it.
him a
I'm
cookie.
done."
I'm giving him. I disagree with you. I'm giving him a cookie. Does Eric Spoelstra get cookies for this game?
Why not?
I loved him
Angrily
angrily
storming.
calling timeouts, stomping onto the court. And look, it was funny, right? It was hilarious. Eric Spoelstra is the absolute king in going onto the court to call his timeout, which, by the way, is illegal, and they never call it for him. They never call against him. And because they don't, he continues to do it, and I'm not complaining. It's hilarious. It gives us great comedy. But I thought the timing of those timeouts were really important. Like anytime the Heat kind of took their foot off the gas, he would get pissed off and call a timeout and yell at him. And I thought, hey, for a team that had been winning, who led wire to wire in this game, the fact that their coach wouldn't let them kind of do that, I thought was really important and speaks to what gets this team going and why they have been so good, and like the reason why they haven't had some of these disappointing losses that kind of plagued them at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. So we've got 3 cookies left to give out after that.
No, I'm giving Spo 2 cookies for that. So then we have 1 cookie left.
Give it to Jimmy. I mean, come on, 19 points,
Jimmy
7
gets
of
the cookie.
13 from the floor, plus 21 from the field. The game, 30 minutes from him. A surprising 30 minutes. I know he had to play a little bit more than he probably would have liked to in the third quarter, but other than that, just a phenomenal game from him. Does so much so well. Continues to prove that he is the all-star. And today we should make note that
Yes.
Jason Tatum is starting in place of Kevin Durant, who is injured and will miss the All-Star game, of course. So Jason Tatum getting the nod over Jimmy Butler.
I get it. Like, he got more fan votes, so you just sort of give it to him, but that's crap. Like, the fact that the Heat don't have a starter and they're number 1 in the East and the Warriors are number 2 in the West and they have 2 starters on the Western Conference All-Star, like, they should have a starter. It's not a formal rule. Like, they don't have to give it to Tatum. If it was a formal rule, they wouldn't make an announcement about it. That's just sort of what they do, is they give it to the player with the more fan votes, but that's, to me, ridiculous. 2 more notes before we move on. I thought that this team just played with even when the Wizards cut the lead to 7, they just played with we know we're going to win this game kind of swagger. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but you watch this team and the way that they carry themselves during that game, and they're hitting a level of confidence now that is worth monitoring. It's a level of confidence that teams who know they're really good have.
Yep.
And you don't see it very often. You saw it with the Milwaukee Bucks at the last couple of games of the finals last year. You saw it with the Miami Heat during the Big 3, right? You saw it with the Warriors during their dynasty. I'm not comparing this Heat team to those teams. I'm just saying that swagger is rare, and not all teams have it. Brooklyn right now, they don't got it, right? I think the Warriors right now at full health, they have it. Phoenix right now at full health, they have it. Milwaukee
I
still
do.
sometimes has it, but not all the time. But when they're fully healthy, they do. Miami right now, they have it. It's worth pointing out. That's all I'm saying.
I should also point out, then you mentioned the Phoenix Suns, who I do agree with you on that note. I think they're probably second to Miami, the most swaggy team at this point in the NBA. They just their taste of the finals has really lit a fire to them. I was not a believer at the start of the season, but they have disproved me. They've been incredible. They've gone some deep runs, and right now they're up 20 over the Chicago Bulls, who are looking absolutely disheveled. I don't even know that they're missing any of their key players. They've got Zach LaVine out there. They've got DeMar out there. They got Vooch, and yet
Still
somehow,
without Lonzo and Caruso, but yeah.
Yeah, not excusing in Chicago to be down 20 to this grid Phoenix
Didn't
Suns
stop
team,
the Heat in December.
No, absolutely not. So anyway, we'll move on. We'll talk a little bit more about Duncan Robinson, whether or not he's still a viable trade candidate in our last segment of the show. And of course, keep those comments coming in here. Not you, Uncle Joey, or whoever the hell you are. If I'm such a fucking, I don't know, somebody who's calling me, of all people, a fucking dweeb and saying that I am a Gators alum, which actually I'm not. Go Canes, bitch. Anyway, I will go right now and mention that a sponsor of this show is BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football continues its march to the playoffs, right to the big game in a couple weeks, BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college football, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live reel updates on current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. Bet online, where the game starts. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show. As always, leave a review. Make sure you subscribe to our show. For our updates on the NBA trade deadline on Thursday. So many people, I think, prior to this game, thinking that the Heat were probably going to make a minor move of some kind. I curse a lot. Don't worry about it. I've cursed a lot on this show. Maybe you're a first-time listener, but either way, as far as the trade deadline is concerned, you see that hot start from Duncan Robinson. You see him kind of keep it going throughout the game, and he seems like the biggest piece that would be likely to be moved by the Miami Heat during the trade deadline. But at this point, watching that game, and I tweeted something out very early on after he caught fire early. Does it seem like the Heat would trade Duncan Robinson at this point? Because I have to say, I'm leaning more towards him not going anywhere.
No, I've never thought that trading Duncan Robinson made a whole lot of sense for Miami because he could do things like he did in the first quarter tonight, right? Where he's just, first of all, he started the game really hot from three-point range. What was it? 3 of his first 4, 3 of his first 3, whatever it was from beyond the arc. He is able to do that in a way that nobody else on this Heat roster can, and that includes Max Strus. As good as Max Strus has been, and he was 2 for 5 from three-point range tonight, and I think he started 2 for 2 and then missed his last 3 in garbage time fourth quarter minutes, so it doesn't really matter. But what Duncan Robinson is able to do with that quick release, the fact that he's much taller than Max Strus and can get his shot up over people, and functions within the offense, those dribble handoffs with Bam and everything that we always talk about with him. I just think that he could still win you a game in the playoffs. The way that he is so ignitable, so few players in the league are that ignitable. And what are you going to trade that for, right? I'm not saying Duncan Robinson's the best player on this team. I'm not saying he's the 4th best player. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. With that, with how ignitable again he can get from 3-point range, that can win you a playoff game. And in a 7-game series, that stuff matters. And I don't know. What are you going to trade Duncan Robinson for? Very doubtful you're getting a player who can do that for you, that has that kind of game-winning potential on the biggest stage. And so because of that, Duncan Robinson he's got flaws as a player. He fouls too much. He's not very good defensively. Teams will target him. There's not a whole lot more to his offensive game, although he's gotten better as a passer and a cutter. But, what are you trading him for? That's the other question. So many fans are just like, just trade him. What are you getting for him? You're probably not. You're probably getting a bench player who's not going to be able to swing a game the way that Duncan can potentially.
No. I mean, it's all a great point. I think we've been pretty consistent about that all season long. Is that the value that you're getting for a player that would have to match salaries with a player like Duncan, and he's probably going to provide less of a value. It's the expertise, the threat of what Duncan does. Yes, an imperfect product, as you said, and yet still able to contribute at a high level. And I think the Heat absolutely value that. They get frustrated with him at times. I'm sure they'd want to see him be a little bit more productive, a little bit more consistent defensively, why they want to put him out there to have him at least be an option in fourth quarter situations. But, when you have a game like tonight, you don't really need him, and maybe all is well in the world. But I don't know that you're getting any player that can contribute one thing as well as Duncan does with his
Right.
shooting. And I think you keep this team and its depth intact. Because right now you've got a backup ball handler in Gabe. You've got wing defenders and Max Struess and Caleb Martin. And some of this, Martin certainly, Struess maybe to a lesser degree. But either way, you're hopefully getting a big back in Markieff Morris if he winds up returning to the game to the Heat at some point. I just don't know that there's any clear gaps on this roster as far as
Right.
what your talent is level is concerned and how you match up against other teams in the Eastern Conference. So if that's the case, what do you even need to trade for just to move that salary? I just don't see it. I think it's a trade that they'll certainly explore down the road, just not this
Yeah.
middle of the season.
If you need to move Duncan Robinson to clear some salary because you got the Tyler Hero extension coming up over the summer, you can trade Duncan Robinson over the summer if that's something that you really want to do. You don't have to do it right now. Okay, more Uncle Joey. Can we get to some of the actual questions from the chat? What do you think? I got
Sure.
one right
Why
here.
not? All
All right.
right.
This one comes from Isaac. In your opinion, is this the least talked about one seed in the East by the media in recent years?
That's tough to say. I'm trying to think about whether what I think the Bucks went through this last year because there was a
Yeah,
lot of the same hangover about
they did.
it's just the regular season. Who knows how I'm drawing like Budenholzer is going to shit the bed yet
Right.
again during the playoffs and all this
The
talk.
one
They
thing
had
that
just been
the
swept out by
Bucks had was they had the Giannis MVP case toward the
that's
end of the
fair.
year, and nobody on this Heat team was going to have that, right? So maybe by the end of the season, people start talking about Miami a little bit more, but I don't know. But similar, like to Milwaukee, like Milwaukee doesn't have a huge media contingent. They don't really have a national media presence. Like ESPN doesn't have a reporter in Milwaukee. I don't think that the Athletic has a reporter in Milwaukee, and so those are sort of your two. They don't
Eric
have any.
Nehm. Eric
Is
Nehm.
he the Athletic?
Yeah.
Okay. So they have him, but they don't really have a national presence, and it's similar to Miami. Like you've got the Herald, the Sun Sentinel, a couple local things, you and I,
And us.
and
That's
yeah,
right.
but you don't really have somebody from ESPN following the team all the time. And when we're talking about national media, like that's what it is. Like Fox Sports doesn't dispatch reporters for independent teams, but the Brooklyn Nets, the Golden State Warriors, the LA teams, they're Chicago,
Yeah.
even New Orleans. I think there are media markets in the NBA who have ESPN assigned reporters. And when you don't have that, just the ESPN factor in and of itself actually makes you a little bit less covered than some relative to some of these other teams. So yeah,
And
I don't think the Heat are being talked about quite a bit.
Right. No, and I'm perfectly fine with that too. Like we're
I
talking
know you
about
don't care.
fans. No, I'm talking about fans though. Like I would love more attention to this team because it's more attention for us, which means more
Oh,
clicks, more listens, and all the other stuff. But as far as like the fans are concerned, what they think about, what they know about this game generally by and large is not all that much. So I think it's better for this Heat team to kind of creep up on people the way they did in the Orlando bubble. I think they were really dominant. Then all of a sudden, everybody is thinking to themselves, "Oh, this Heat team is pretty good." Think pieces about Eric Spoelstra as the best coach in the NBA, about Jimmy Butler, about Bam Adebayo after that block on Jason Tatum, et cetera, et cetera. Let them sleep on Miami. Let them sleep on Miami and watch what happens in the playoffs because I think this team is certainly absolutely much more dangerous.
yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying. They have this swagger, this confidence, this hey, we're gonna win no matter what. And
Damn
like
right.
I said, it's worth paying attention to because they are starting to play their best basketball. I wouldn't say at the right time, right? Like there's still some kind of going into the All-Star break stuff, but you're gonna get Oladipo back. We'll see if they get Markieff Morris back or if they can turn that slot on the roster into something else, which is something we're going to talk about later on in the week as we approach the trade deadline. But um, they're starting to hit their stride. They are better. We talked about this, I think, on Monday, how defensively they're playing on a string better than they did before all the injuries and stuff. You're starting to see the time spent, materialize on the court into something meaningful. And I think this team is only going to get better as long as they stay healthy and they start getting guys like Oladipo and potentially Markieff Morris back.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat too about how Miami would face against the Nets.
Mm.
I know you've been a pretty strong, not necessarily a supporter, but you've always aligned yourself with the more talented Nets roster. But given concerns about Harden and his tenure with the team, Kyrie and his availability in a playoff series, Kevin Durant and his health, how do you see this version of this Heat team, as
Yeah.
good as they played lately, matching up with those Nets?
When Kevin Durant comes back, it changes everything. The Nets, we could talk about Kyrie and his vaccination status, James Harden and all this trade scuttle and all that stuff, but really the biggest factor in the Nets not playing well and them going on, an 8-game losing streak recently and all this was the fact that Kevin Durant got hurt.
Right.
And when he comes back, the Nets could still beat anybody. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. I actually really like their team more if they swap Harden for Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons will fill a lot of gaps. And if they can get like a role player like Danny Green
Hmm.
also who can help
Yeah.
fill in that roster, and if they
Yeah.
eventually get Joe Harris back, even though there's some questions locally in Brooklyn whether or not that'll ever happen this season. But
Right.
look, I can't quit the Nets right now. But like I said, I don't think that there's a huge favorite over the Miami Heat right now, the way that they're playing and what they could do potentially. Like Milwaukee, I still think that right now they should be considered the favorites in the East, given everything that's happened with Brooklyn. But um, look, I just said that nobody's better than them. I just think like Milwaukee and Brooklyn are also good, talented teams. That's all I'm saying. Loveless McLovin.
I look,
Um,
in all fairness, I think, everybody comes to us for some analysis of this team. We cannot be fans. That's up to you guys. That's what makes you guys so special and so wonderful, is that you have
right.
that incredible passion for the team. We have to be able to step outside that box just occasionally and be able to give you a larger outside perspective.
I'll
That's
say
why you keep.
this: if the playoffs started right now, I would have the Heat coming out of the East. I don't know what that's worth, but it's not worth nothing. It
No,
means
no,
something.
I I agree. I think of the teams at the top of the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia's dangerous. I think
Yes, should have
Milwaukee's
mentioned
more
them.
dangerous. I'm not as scared of the Nets, and I've said this before on this podcast. I think the big three of Brooklyn is scary. I don't think the Nets as a whole are scary.
Yeah.
And given Miami's depth and everything else, yeah, you're going to get 50 points from Kevin Durant, but that means that you're more likely to shut everybody else down. And I'm having less and less faith in James Harden and his ability to dominate
Yeah.
any one series. So to me, I like Miami's chances. I absolutely think they represent the Eastern Conference this year, and they'll take on the Phoenix Suns in the NBA Finals. It should be a really,
That
really fun
that's
matchup.
that's sort of where I'm leaning right now as far as my finals pick. I think I like the Suns out of the West a lot, actually. What kind of going back to the sort of the media attention, I keep hearing stuff like, "Oh, the East is sort of weak. It's a little shaky right now." I'm
Ridiculous.
sorry, I don't get it. Like it's disrespectful to first of all the champion Milwaukee Bucks. They're still good, and their net rating with Drew and Middleton and Giannis on the floor is still very good. And once they get healthy, I think they're dangerous. Brooklyn, we'll see what happens. Whatever, they're a joke, absolutely, but they're very talented. But it's disrespectful to Miami. It's disrespectful to what Joel Embiid in Philadelphia has done. It's disrespectful to what Chicago has done. I know that they're not as hot as they were, but they've still they're the team that the Heat are battling right now at the top of the conference for the number 1 seed for. It like these are legitimately good teams. And I kind of look at the West and I'm like, what do you got? You have the Suns and you have the Warriors, and that's all I'm scared of from the Western Conference. That's it. Like I think the East is much deeper.
Yeah.
And I think their ceiling is just as high as anybody from the West. They just haven't really put it together on the court right now, but that doesn't really matter once you get to the postseason. What matters in the postseason is how good you are then. And again, I'll say this: Miami's on the right track. They're on the right track.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to wrap or before we wrap up today's episode?
No, I think those were all my takeaways from the game. Bam Adebayo is really good. I think I'm going to do a write up on him for my Substack at some point this week, but I got to talk to some people first. But really looking forward to the trade deadline. Everything that happens in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA. Doubtful Miami makes many moves. We have some
Yeah.
ideas. We'll talk about that later in this week, but certainly worth keeping an eye on the deadline if you're a Heat fan because of how it will impact the Heat and all these things that we're talking about, how it impacts the Eastern Conference hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's going to be movement in the East. We're already seeing it with Cleveland and getting
Yep.
Karis LeVert and stuff like that. We'll have a
Yeah.
breakdown on all that stuff as the week goes on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in for our live show today. Thank you so much for leaving comments and questions. We'll try to answer those in an upcoming mailbag episode, of course. And keep tuning in. Make sure you subscribe here, subscribe to our podcast. Make sure you get the show wherever available so you can get the best coverage available. Make sure to also check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.